time as well as everyone else's time this evening, let's make a start, and I'll just do the introduction. So I just want to welcome everyone to this exclusive member-only event for PMI UK chapter this evening. And tonight's all about evaluation. Now, feedback is the breakfast of champions, so said American author Ken Blanchard, where our speaker today also says the same. But if that breakfast is not cooked or correctly served with grunt, it can leave a bitter taste that can dishearten the very people that you're trying to encourage. Hi there.
Hi.
Thus, how can you evaluate to elevate? How can you evaluate to elevate? And it is a really critical skill if you want to encourage your colleagues, your friends, or even your family to reach new heights. Now, by the end of this workshop this evening, you will know how to serve up a full course feedback breakfast that will fuel a champion. Now, our speaker tonight is no stranger to PMI UK. In fact, if you were around, he was with us just a couple of weeks ago. Now, we love having him back. We love learning so much from him. And above all, we love his energy, his enthusiasm, and his passion. And you know what? It's contagious and in a really great way. And when our speaker tonight is not doing ultra marathons or traversing the world or going on safari or even writing books or producing amazing LinkedIn content, he's busy leading the way by showing the way. So please prepare those vocal cords. Tonight is going to be interactive. Get that bass into rhythm and bang those drums. The conductor of our orchestra has arrived. He's in the building. It's Kyle Murtagh. Kyle, how are you doing today?
I feel a lot better after being called a conductor.
Excellent. And what are you going to cover with us this evening?
Really interesting topic tonight, Nigel. Feedback. You know, we all need to give someone feedback at some point, whether it's at work or at home. Maybe it's a colleague. Maybe it's a personal relation that you need to give feedback to. But how do we do it in such a way so they feel inspired, motivated, elevated, if you will, after the conversation? That's what we're going to talk about.
Well, great. I really do look forward to that. And I just want to say to the folks on the call, tonight's session will be interactive. There should be a button at the top right-hand side of your video pane saying request audio and video. When prompted by Kyle, either from the back of the breakout rooms or when he asks questions, if you want to put yourself forward, please click on that button. One of our moderators will get you front and center onto that stage. But Kyle, it's over to you, sir. Good luck.
Thank you very much, Nigel. When I was 20, I faced the toughest challenge known to humankind. Table topics. Now, if you don't know what table topics is, imagine this. You go along to a meeting where there are 20 people waiting, 20 friendly strangers. And at some point during this meeting, one of the friendly strangers asks you a question. But they don't expect you just to answer that question back to them. No. They want you to stand up in front of the entire room and deliver a 2-minute unprepared speech on that question. That's table topics. And I'll never forget my first ever topic. Kyle, if a zombie apocalypse happened in Glasgow, where would you go? I said 2 words. The pub. And then I sat right back down. And then it was time for my evaluator to stand up. You see, every time you speak at one of these clubs like Toastmasters or other speaking organizations, you always get feedback. And the person who was giving me feedback that particular night was a man called Jim. And Jim opened by saying this: "Nice try with that table topic, Kyle. Next time, aim for 3 words." But thankfully, Jim's feedback got a bit more constructive after that. He started talking about how it was great that I showed the courage to speak at my first meeting. He also mentioned that it was good that even though I just said 2 words, they were a bit funny, which was a positive. But then he started giving me some suggestions on how I could improve. And one of those suggestions really stuck with me. He said, Kyle, I think your problem is that you believe you can't speak, when actually you can. We all can. And the only way you're going to build that belief up is by coming back to meetings like this and practicing, trying to get a little bit better each time you get up and speak. So that would be my challenge to you. Come back here and do a table topic every week, and you might just become a great speaker in the process. And that's exactly what I did after that meeting. Every week, I would go back and do more topics. And slowly but surely, I got a little bit better each time. And eventually, I lost that fear I had of speaking and actually started to enjoy it. Now, 6 years on, I'm a European champion of public speaking. I've wrote a 5-star book on the topic, and I've started my own business called Confidence by Design, where I help other people overcome their fear and become compelling public speakers too. But the reason I'm pointing this out to you and sharing this with you is to highlight that none of that may have happened for me if it was not for Jim's feedback. And this is what feedback can do. Feedback that you deliver can literally alter the course of someone's life. And that's why it's so important that we use our words wisely when we're giving someone feedback, because you never know the impact you are having. So we're going to talk tonight about how you can deliver feedback which does elevate people. Now, before I share how we're going to do that tonight and how we're going to spend the next couple of hours or less, let me ask you this question, and I would love you to answer it in the chat. Based on your experience, and perhaps based on what you heard in that story, what do you think is the difference between bad feedback and good feedback? What is the key difference between bad feedback and good feedback? Type your answer for me into the chat. What is the key difference between bad feedback and good feedback? Being constructive, says Ruth. I like that point. Any more suggestions? We've got Nigel talking about criticizes. One is motivating, the other is demotivating. Specific, oh, I like that from Merv. Honest, says Maura. Succinct, we've got coming into the chat as well here. So some really good suggestions coming in. I like all of these, but I think the one which really hits the nail on the head is specific. But I would use another word. I would say the difference between bad feedback and good feedback is clarity. You see, when someone gives you poor feedback, think back to a time where you got some really crap feedback. Maybe the person was being a bit of a, well, you fill in the expletive word there. But probably the reason that feedback was not good for you was because it didn't give you a clear idea of how you could progress going forward. After you heard it, you didn't know what you had to do next to get better. And likewise, on the other side, if you think back to a time where you did receive good feedback, the person probably gave you a clear idea. They probably gave you a clear picture in your head of what you needed to do to improve going forward. So at the heart of good feedback is clarity. Clarity is absolutely essential. And that's what Jim gave me that day. He didn't just say, believe you can speak, Kyle, because that's not helpful. No, he told me how to get there by practicing, doing more topics, trying to get a little bit better each time. He painted a clear picture in my head of what I needed to do to improve. And what we're going to look at today over the next 90 minutes or so or more is we're going to look at the 3 phases of feedback. Now, let me just share my screen right now to show you what the 3 phases are. You're going to love these. Phase 1 is to celebrate. It's to celebrate the person, to tell them what they did well, tell them what they're doing great, tell them about what they are strong at. That's phase 1. Phase 2 is where you suggest. This is where you suggest where someone could improve going forward. What could they do to become a bit better? What would your recommendations be? And then phase 3 is to inspire that person, to leave them on a positive note so that they take action on your words. And what we're going to do tonight is work through these 3 phases. And at the heart of all 3 will be clarity. And I hope you see that as we continue on. The last thing I've got to say before we get fully kicked off here is, like Nigel mentioned, tonight will be interactive. I'm not just going to be doing the speaking, you're going to be having to do some of the work as well. So there will be more questions that I'd love you to answer in the chat. We will be doing breakout rooms where you'll get to interact with other people on this call and have good discussions. And we will even tonight give you an opportunity to practice delivering feedback. Yes, that's right. You will get an opportunity to put the skills you learned tonight into practice, and you'll get feedback on how you deliver your feedback. That's some inception stuff right there. But my point is, get involved as much as you can, because the more you put into tonight's session, the more you will gain from it, and the more you will improve at delivering feedback. If you're happy to get involved, then type a big yes into the chat for me. And if we get more than 2 yeses, I'll continue. If we get only 1 yes, well, we'll call it a night. Okay, thank God, we've got more than 1 yes. That would have been a very short workshop otherwise. Brilliant. Let's get kicked off then, everyone. So we're going to start by talking about how to celebrate someone, right? How to celebrate someone when giving feedback, because that ultimately is phase 1. But I want to ask you this question, and again, you can answer it in the chat. Why do you think it's important to start by celebrating a person instead of suggesting how they can improve? Why would we start by celebrating them instead of suggesting how they can improve? Type your answers into the chat for me. Why start with the positives instead of the negatives about someone's performance? What do you think? Build them up, says Nigel. Set a good tone for the conversation. Performance behavior, I see coming in there too. People need to know why they have some value, otherwise they won't listen for the rest of what you say. All of those together are perfect. Essentially, when you're giving feedback to someone, you've got to understand that they are feeling a little bit nervous. They're worried about what you've got to say. They're a bit tense. And if you start off by criticizing them or pointing out what they have not done particularly well, they're going to get even more tense and more closed off. And they'll be less open to taking on board your words. But if you start by delivering the positives, if you start by celebrating someone, well, what's going to happen? Well, they're going to feel a little bit more at ease. They're going to feel a little bit better about themselves. That tension is going to dissipate and they'll be more open to your suggestions later on. So that's why we always start by pointing out the positives, by celebrating someone. And this brings me on to my first breakout room for you today. I'm going to put you in a breakout room with about 3 other people. I'm going to give you 8 minutes to discuss these 2 points. Here's the points. Number 1, I want you to discuss how you find positives in someone's performance. How do you find what someone has done well? How do you identify that? And then number 2, how do you articulate those positives to someone? So 2 things to discuss in your breakout room. Number 1, how do you find the positives? And number 2, how do you articulate them? Have that discussion in your breakout room. Go around in alphabetical order so everybody gets a chance to speak. And remember, you've only got 8 minutes. So probably only speak for about 2 minutes each before moving on to the next person. I'm going to set up these breakout rooms now, and then I will give you the countdown launch. We're going to give you 8 minutes in total in these breakout rooms, and they are going to open in 5, 4, 3, 2. Are you holding on to something? 1. They should be open now. Right, welcome back from your breakout room. Hope you had a good discussion in there. What I'd like to invite you to do now is, if you'd like to share what you discussed in your breakout room, click the button at the top right of your screen which says share audio and video. And then I'll bring you up to the main stage with me and you can tell me what you discussed. So click that button if you'd like to share what your group discussed. Don't wait for someone else in your group to do it. Just you do it. And then we'll get you up here so we can share some of the great ideas that have been floating around in the last 10 minutes. So click that button if you can see it, top right of your screen. If you can't see the button, oh, I think Adil has seen the button. Let's try and bring him up here. Here we go. Hi, Adil. How are you doing?
Hi, Kyle. I'm doing good. Good. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, let's hear from you first, and then we'll come on to Ona. Have I pronounced that correctly?
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. So, Adil, please tell me what you discussed.
Right. So what we discuss in our group is being project manager. Usually we are having to feedback to our team and team members who are not, kind of reporting directly to us. So sometimes we have to be really careful on what sort of feedback that we can give. If it is related to the project and the way they have progressed or, made any improvements, then you probably can have one-to-one meeting with them. But there was another point that we discussed, and I found it really interesting, that sometimes it's not an individual feedback, and sometimes the feedback to the team, how the team is performing together. Because in order to make project success, the team has to really, come together and make difference. So how you basically deal with the situation where you have to give the feedback to the team. So that's what we also discussed. And, how do you articulate? Depends on the feedback. If somebody has really outshined and performed really well, maybe sometimes you want to really call out and share this good news with the whole team as well.
Okay.
That might be motivating for some other people. Look, this XYZ person has done really well, and that has been shared with the team. So that can be a motivating factor as well.
Yeah. So sort of celebrating them in front of their colleagues to inspire them. Absolutely. Thank you, Adil. Really appreciate that. Ona, was there any suggestions in your group in terms of how to find positives, in terms of how to find good parts of someone's performance?
Yes, there was. One of the things that was raised was acknowledge the positive, even if the bad outweighs the good.
Yeah.
That's what you have to try and find a way on how you can kind of bring about, just kind of give that person confidence and all that. And be honest as well. I guess it's more of the articulation as well on how you go about it and expressing it. Start with a positive and then go back and kind of see how you can kind of feedback on that person to make sure they improve. And then we kind of say the question is contextual, again, depending on what you're giving feedback on. If you say it's presentation, your listening skills and how you listen to kind of capture what is it they're presenting and then where they can improve as well will be good. And if they add value is one of the points which we ran out of time. There are some technical issues. Those are the kind of points that were raised.
No, I really like that first one. Always make sure you find the positive, even if the negative is much bigger. And there's so much truth in that. There's always a positive you can pull out. You've just got to look for it a little bit more carefully. Thank you for that. What I want to do now is share with you my top 5 tips for finding positives, but also for articulating them as well. So let me walk you through what they are now by sharing my screen. Here we go. Tip number 1 would be to talk about how someone's performance impacted you personally. In other words, what did they do that had a personal impact on you, that made you feel a certain emotion, that made your life easier, that inspired you, that motivated you? How did their actions have an impact personally on you? Now, in speaking, if you're evaluating a presentation, this can be a lot easier because perhaps a speaker is telling a story and you can really connect with that story. Maybe they're telling a story about their family, and you can see yourself, your own family, and what they're describing, and therefore you can be connected to that, and you're impacted by that. But in the workplace, we can also find ways to articulate how certain actions impact us. Maybe you've got someone, a colleague at work, who is always on time, always sharp, always punctual, and you can talk about how that inspires you and encourages you to be more punctual yourself, or that it makes your life so much more easier because they are setting the example for the rest of the team. There's a way in which you can talk about how what they've done has personally impacted you, has personally improved your outlook, or maybe even improved your life as well. My second tip for you is along the lines again of what I just described there, but it's slightly different. To talk about the unique quality someone has. In other words, what is unique about them? What makes them stand out as the standout duck in the pond? When you talk about someone's uniqueness, the beauty in this is that you're often talking about their personality. Because personalities are ultimately what makes us unique. Our personality is what determines how we act, right? So if you can complement someone's uniqueness, in other words, complement their personality, you'll make them feel more confident when they're at work. For instance, maybe you have someone at work who always has such a positive outlook. They always come into the office smiling, or they're always cracking jokes, making other people feel good. If you compliment them on that quality, they're going to show more of that going forward. So that is a great way to pick out a positive. Talk about what makes them unique, what makes them stand out, what makes them different. Third tip for you would be, when giving feedback, to make sure you have examples. When you give feedback and you say that someone was great at negotiating, but you don't give an example, it makes that compliment quite hollow. But if you say to someone, you know, Charles, it was brilliant when you were negotiating in that meeting, especially when that guy said that we are not going below 50% drop, and you got him even further down to 60%. That was brilliant. You know, by giving a specific example of when someone did negotiate well, it gives that more meaning, more value, and it creates clarity. That key word for us today. If I'm giving a speaker feedback and I say to them, you have really good gestures, that's not very good. What I need to do instead is say to them, you know, your gestures are brilliant. I really loved the one where you were pretending to hold a tiny baby bird, because it made me feel like I was there with you. I could imagine that baby bird in your hands. So keep up those descriptive gestures. By me highlighting that key moment, it encourages that speaker to do more descriptive gestures like that and make his or her stories more compelling. So always have an example when you're giving a compliment, regardless. In fact, always have an example when you're giving feedback, regardless if it's a compliment or a suggestion for improvement. Examples create clarity. Fourth tip for you. Now, this one might seem a little bit bizarre at first, but just stick with me for a second here. My fourth tip would be ice cream. I'm kidding. My fourth tip would be to be diverse with your compliments. Be diverse when celebrating someone. Imagine for a second that each one of these ice cream flavors represents a different skill. Maybe vanilla, for instance, represents knowledge-based skills. In other words, job-based skills. If we're giving feedback to a data analyst, vanilla feedback would be complimenting them on their ability to analyze data. But you know and I know there's far more skills out there than just knowledge-based skills. There's also interpersonal skills. Strawberry ice cream, how someone is a great listener, or how someone has a motivated attitude, or how someone's personality plays a role on how effective they are at work. You can compliment people on those skills as well. And likewise, you can compliment them on their transferable skills, on their chocolate ice cream. Talk about how they've got great leadership skills, or how they've got great creativity skills, or multitasking skills. The problem is when we give feedback, we tend to just focus on knowledge-based skills, vanilla ice cream, when there are so much more flavors we can explore with our feedback. So try to be diverse with your feedback so that you can give a speaker or a person rather a comprehensive overview of their performance. Very important. Amora, it is yummy. I love that. I love that. Now, my fifth and final tip is a very serious one. If you take nothing from what I've said so far, let it be this. Because the fifth and final tip applies across the board, whether you're giving a compliment or whether you're giving a suggestion. And here it is. Tip number 5 is to get to the why. To get to the why. You have to explain why something is good, or you have to explain why something is bad. We must understand that human beings, they require that knowledge, they require that insight. If you tell me why what I'm doing is good, I'm far more likely to do it more going forward. And likewise, if you give me a reason why something is bad and I agree with it, I'm far more likely to stop that behavior going forward as well. So you have to get to the why. Why is this thing good? If someone is really good at facilitating meetings, talk about why that is so beneficial to the team, what that brings to the table. It means we can control the room better. It means we can be more on time. It means everybody is heard in the meeting, so the best ideas come forward. Talk about the why behind the compliment. This is absolutely critical. So just to summarize those 5 tips for you, when it comes to celebrating a speaker, here are some ideas on how you can do that effectively. Number 1, talk about how what they did impacted you. Secondly, talk about their unique quality. What was unique about them at work that has had an impact on you that you'd like to see more of? 3, use examples to create clarity, crystal clear clarity, so people have an idea of what moment they did was well and what they need to continue doing going forward. And 4, be diverse, right? Use all flavors of ice cream. Do not get stuck in just terms of complimenting someone for their job. Compliment their interpersonal skills. Compliment their transferable skills as well. And number 5, why. You've got to explain why it's good. It's not enough just to say that was great. We've got to get to the why. We're going to try and do something a little bit unique now. It's fine hearing those skills, right? It's fine writing them down, but there's nothing quite like practicing them in real time. So what I'm going to do now is invite Nigel to come up to the stage for me. And there he is, bang on time. He is listening. Because what Nigel is going to do is he's going to be a little bit of a guinea pig for us. I'm going to ask Nigel a question. I'm going to ask Nigel a table topic. And he's going to give us a 2-minute unprepared speech on that table topic. But what I would like you to do while you're listening is to write down all of the things you think Nigel is doing well. So write down how he's holding your attention, write down how you liked what he was saying, write down a list of compliments for Nigel. And then what we'll do is, if you'd like, you can volunteer and you can come up and actually give Nigel some feedback to his face. So tell him what you did well while practicing some of the skills we just discussed previously. I hope that's clear, because we're about to commence. Nigel, first of all, how are you feeling, my friend?
Oh, very well, thanks, Carl. Thank you for asking.
Good, good.
Bit nervous.
I'll be in control of the time, so we won't be having you speak forever. I've got the magic pens for lights tonight. But here's my question for you, and I'll read this twice, Nigel, to give you a bit of time to think. If you were setting off to Mars and could take only one luxury item with you, what would it be? If you were setting off to Mars and could only take one luxury item with you, what would it be?
Let's imagine Mars for a second. What facilities does it have? Does it have electricity? Don't think so. Does it have air? I hope so. Does it have sunlight? I guess so. So what luxury item would be good for me to take? What perhaps might you take? Well, I know Elon Musk wants us to go to Mars, but a Tesla's not going to be much good, even though that's a luxury product. But then again, what is luxury? I'm sure all of us in this room here tonight has a different definition of what luxury actually means. For me personally, it's going to have to be something that evokes a feeling, not necessarily, although it's going to be a material object of sorts, it's got to be practical, it's got to mean something to me, it's got to deliver some value. Now that could be a whole range of different things. Is it a book? Well, I don't need electricity for a book. That could be, but I'll get slightly bored of that. Maybe a pen and a paper to write down the journey through my life. That's a possibility. Now, what else could there be? Photographs, maybe, of the loved ones left behind. I'm assuming, Kyle, I'm the only one. Or maybe if I've got a battery that could last long enough, it could pay my 1,000 songs in my pocket. How long would that last? A day? Well, probably longer, maybe a week or so. Is that going to be enough? I need something that's going to keep me sane. I still need to think about this. But fundamentally, I think within myself, my luxury is within myself. So actually, if I am on my own, Kyle, I would just take myself and be happy with that choice. I've got everything I need within me to be happy and content. So I'll leave everyone with that thought. For those of you that want to take Teslas, for those of you that want to take all your iPods, and for those of you that want to take your smartphones or anything else, maybe there is something else that you could take too. Kyle.
Thank you so much, Nigel. That was a beautiful ending. Very well done, my friend. Very poetic. I love it. Okay, now here's the fun bit. Nigel, please stay on the main screen, if you wouldn't mind, because we're going to give some people an opportunity to come up and give you some feedback now. So if you would like to give Nigel some feedback, in other words, tell him what he did well during that topic, please try and share your video and your audio now, and we'll bring you up to the main stage. You can just be to give one compliment, and then you can go away. You don't have to do a full evaluation or anything crazy. It can literally just be 20 seconds to give Nigel a compliment, and then we can move on to someone else. So if you'd like to come up, please do. If it goes past 10 seconds, Nigel, I think that means the worst. I'm only kidding. Here's some people. Right, so we're going to bring up Lucy first to the main room. Bring Derek and Adil as well, which we'll come to later on. But Lucy, let's come to you. What did you like about what Nigel did there? Give us 30 seconds, please.
Okay, so firstly, thank you, Nigel. That was really good. What I really liked is how you pull the listener in. You have a very conversational tone and a positive tone at that. And also you maintain eye contact, although we're not face to face, you still maintained eye contact throughout. And also from what your luxury item was, as you were talking as how I would from a kind of practical sense at first, but I did like the little twist at the end. So thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much there, Lucy. Now, I love your compliments. Fully agree with them. But I think this is a good opportunity for us, because what we want to try and do is flesh those compliments out a little bit. So for instance, you said there Nigel had great eye contact. Mm-hmm. Now, what is the why behind that? Well, the reason eye contact is so important is because you hopefully felt that Nigel was talking directly to you, right? So it's important to say that so that Nigel knows why it's so powerful and why you should continue doing it. But great compliments there. Very, very observant. Thank you so much, Lucy. Derek, could I come to you, my friend? Could you give Nigel your feedback, please?
Yeah, hi. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, brilliant. So well done, Nigel. We know it's not your first time at doing this. But what I particularly liked was the fact that you were able to use your body language very effectively on a virtual platform. So when asking questions, you used your body language to support the question, to invoke an answer or indeed to invoke thought. At the same time, you didn't overdo it, you didn't overindulge, excuse me. So you gave some variation, which is also very important in terms of the nodding and still keeping eye contact, and when suitable, smiling to support and consolidate the point you were making.
Love that. Thank you so much, Derek. And I really like how you gave a concrete example there. You didn't just say Nigel, had body language which supported his words. No, you said when Nigel asked questions, his body language supported his words. So clear example. Nigel now knows when he's asking questions, he's golden, and he can continue to do that. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Adil, we'll come to you.
Sure. Well, Nigel smashed it. So, apart from having a wonderful speech, maintaining gestural language, what really impacted on me is that Nigel has given me something to think about. So, it was engaging and thought-provoking at the same time. So he has given me something to think about.
Excellent. Love it, Adil, because that's tip number one, right? How it personally impacted you. It's made you reevaluate things. Maybe before that topic, you thought, well, I'll take my iPhone. Maybe now you think all I need is Adil, right? So it's got that impact. So brilliant stuff there. Thank you so much, gents. If you could all clear off now so I can continue on, that'd be great. But thank you so much for coming up and sharing. Really appreciate that. And hopefully everyone could see there how using some of these tips are important. Yes, I understand in work we're not all evaluating presentations, but the same principles apply regardless of the medium you're delivering feedback in. Think about how it has impacted you. Think about giving examples. Think about sharing the why. These things make your feedback clearer. Clarity, remember, that is key for us. So moving forward from the celebrate phase of delivering feedback, the next phase, of course, is suggest. Now, this is where things get a little bit dicey, right? This is where we're going to have to say what the problem is and how someone can improve, right? How they can advance going forward. And I think when it comes to suggest, this phase in particular, there's two things we need to consider. We need to consider our delivery of these suggestions. In other words, how we use our voice, most importantly, but also our body language when making these suggestions, but also our structure, how we're structuring these suggestions to make them clear and to make them impactful. So let's talk about delivery first of all, and then we'll take a quick break before moving on to structure. Now, when it comes to delivery, and I want to focus specifically on voice here today because I think it's so important, the tone you're using when delivering feedback. I believe there's two feelings, emotions that you need to get across in the tone of your voice. And they're on your screen now. Number one is confidence. If you don't sound confident when you're giving your suggestions, that can make the person who's receiving the feedback unsure about your credibility. And then when they doubt what you are saying, they're not going to take action on what you're saying. But on the other hand, you also need to show empathy, because sometimes when we're delivering feedback, we're saying things that could potentially be a little bit hurtful for people, right? Sometimes we need to tell people the truth, and it's not always the nicest thing to hear. So we need to be empathetic with our tone as well. And it's this combination that will help us greatly when delivering suggestions. So we're going to talk about both, starting with confidence first of all. Does anyone have any tips for sounding more confident? If you do, type them into the chat. What would be your tip for sounding more confident? If you have any, type them into the chat. Let's see what you've got. How would you make yourself sound confident when delivering a suggestion? Maybe this will get you thinking. Any suggestions at all? Eye contact, Adil is, yeah, absolutely. Deep breath, I love that one, Nigel. Firm voice coming in as well here. Be prepared. Well, of course, that does help tremendously when you're fully prepared. Merv's got speak slowly and deliberately. Yeah, so really good suggestions there coming from everyone. Stand, I like that too, Nigel. I'm going to go with Nigel's first point to begin with. Breathing deep. I think what we've got to understand is that our breath is our power. When you breathe deep, you give yourself so much more power to firstly project your voice. You can project further. Secondly, your voice goes naturally a little bit deeper, even if you are a woman, which makes you sound more confident. And then thirdly, by breathing deep, we touch on Merv's point, by breathing deep, you tend to speak more slowly and more controlled. Now, if you compare that with the opposite, breathing shallow, well, what happens? Well, firstly, you can barely project your voice because you don't have enough breath. Secondly, you really have a trouble with speaking slowly because you just want to get the words out as fast as possible so that you can take another breath. And then thirdly, your voice goes a little bit higher because you're running out of breath too. So breathing deep is a great way to set yourself up for success alongside Ruth's point of preparing. If you prepare more in advance, if you know what you're going to say, saying it, and even if you've practiced it a little bit in advance, is easier. It's easier to say when you have that bit of prep behind you. But the last tip I want to give you for sounding more confident is all about how you end your sentences. You see, when we end a sentence, we've got a choice. We can either end our sentence on an upbeat, like this, or a downbeat, like this. Now, when we end our sentence on an upbeat, even if we're making a statement, it sounds a little bit like we're asking a question. Because naturally, when we ask questions, we end on an upbeat because we're less sure of ourselves. That's why we're asking a question. But if we do the opposite, if we end on a downbeat when making a statement, now we sound more sure of ourselves. Now we sound more confident in our points. So if you're making statements and you want to sound confident, end on a downbeat as opposed to an upbeat. Very subtle, but very important. So that's confidence. That's how to sound confident. But we also need to be empathetic. Because like I say, at times, we're going to be delivering feedback which might be hard to hear. So we need to be empathetic with our tone too. Now, does anyone have any suggestions on how you could sound more empathetic when you speak? How you could show empathy through the tone of your voice? If you have a suggestion, type it into the chat for me, please. How could you show empathy through the tone of your voice? Any suggestions at all? To get you thinking a little, there's 3 things we need to consider here. We need to consider tonality, tempo, and volume. I think Nigel's got tone and pace in there. Shola's got use a softer tone. Well, let's start there. Let's start with Shola's point there. Tonality. When we're delivering sensitive feedback, we don't want to use a very firm tone like this, do we? No, we want to have a softer tone, a more sensitive tone, right? And I think the best way I can describe this voice is pretend you're talking to a friend who's going through a hard time. You would be sensitive. You would be caring when talking to them. So try and soften your tone with that in mind. Second thing I would have for you would be to touch on one of Nigel's points about pace. When we're delivering sensitive information, we don't want to rush through it like this and get it over and done with, do we? No. We want to slow things down and show someone that we're willing to spend time with them. We're willing to work through this with them. And then lastly, volume is important too. You don't want to be loud and let the whole office know when you're talking about something sensitive. No, you want to be quieter, softer, right? And less noise when you're delivering that sensitive information. So if you can do those 3 things, if you can soften your tone, secondly, if you can slow down your pace, and then thirdly, speak a little bit quieter than usual, that will help you sound more empathetic. And it's that combination which is going to be helpful. At times, you're going to have to sound confident. You're going to have to sound sure of yourself when suggesting how things can improve going forward. But at the same time, when delivering perhaps sensitive information or points which could potentially be hurtful, a little bit of empathy really can work well at that particular moment. What we're going to do now is we're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to move on how to structure your suggestions. So let's meet back up at 35 minutes past 7, and then we'll continue on from there. So go get a coffee, go to the bathroom, grab a biscuit from the tin if you've got any, and I will see you back here at 35 minutes past 7. We'll be starting sharp, so don't be late. Right, welcome back in, everyone. Hope you had a nice break. Just to recap, we're still on phase 2, where we're making suggestions when delivering our feedback. And we've talked about the delivery side of things. We've talked about how we need to sound confident and how to sound empathetic. We've explored that. Now we're going to explore the structure in which you should be making your suggestions. And I think it might be beneficial, actually, if we could maybe bring either Nigel or Merv up to the stage just for a little demo for a second. There won't be any more table topics, Nigel, if you're coming up. Don't worry about that.
I'm here. I'm all yours.
Good. I just think it would be good for people to have a visual while doing this, because I want everyone to imagine that I'm giving Nigel some feedback right now. And the problem is this. Nigel, in meetings, is a bit of a bulldozer. Yes, that's the face of a bulldozer you're looking at, everyone, right? So in other words, Nigel's the type of guy who he loves the sound of his own voice, right? He comes in with his own agenda, doesn't listen to anyone else. So that's the premise we're going to do this from. And I'm going to walk you through three steps for delivering suggestions in an effective way when doing feedback. So step number 1 is you have to highlight the problem. You have to highlight the problem. You have to highlight what is wrong, but more importantly, you have to explain why it is a problem for the reasons I talked about earlier. When people know why what they're doing is wrong, they're less likely to do it going forward. So going back to our scenario with Nigel, this is how I would perhaps go about doing that. I would say, Nigel, moving on to some ways you could improve going forward. One thing I am noticing is that in meetings, you are the loudest voice. Now, although it's fantastic that you're confident to share your ideas, and you often do have great ideas, my friend, what does happen is other people in the meeting feel less inclined to speak up. They feel a little bit intimidated. And what that means for us overall is that we're not hearing everyone's ideas. And when we don't hear everyone's ideas, sometimes we don't select the best one for the team going forward. So what I've done there is I've spoke about what the problem is. I've actually given an example of the problem as well in meetings, Nigel being loud. But I've also talked about how it's not beneficial for the team collectively because we're not getting the ideas forward. That's the why behind it. Very important whenever you're talking about the problem that you explain the why. Moving on to step number 2, this is where you bring in the answer, right? The solution to the problem. So what are you going to do to fix the problem? What is the path forward? And what's really important when you're talking about the answer is that you give examples. You give examples. Why do you think we want to give examples, Nigel? Can you remember? What do examples do?
Give more gravitas to what you're trying to say, make it more relatable to the person so they understand. I've just got one thing going around in my mind, actually, Kyle, while you're doing this. In the format you're saying, would you do this in a group situation or on a one-to-one basis?
This is probably one-to-one with us right now. Yes. We're in my office, Nigel. We're in my office. Lights out. Yeah. But it depends on the scenario, right? It depends on the scenario and what you're discussing and so forth. But let's just say this is just the two of us right now. But the reason we want to give an example is because it, again, creates clarity. Gives you a clear idea of what you need to do going forward. So going back to our hypothetical situation, what I could then say is, but I think the answer for this issue is quite simple, Nigel. I think what would work best is if you wouldn't mind speaking last in our meetings. That way, everyone around the table can share their ideas freely, and then we can end with your idea. So that way, we're all collectively sharing and we're finding the best solution as a group going forward. So the example is clear because I'm telling Nigel, if you could do this, and I've given them the visual in a meeting, if you can speak last, it should be clear for Nigel what I'm suggesting going forward. I hope everyone can get that, see that point there. It's very important that you give examples, that I don't just say to Nigel, could you be a little bit quieter in meetings? Could you let others speak? No, I tell him how he can do that. The how is so critical. It really is. But this last step is even more critical. in many ways. And the last step is check. I need to check with Nigel to see what he thinks about all of this, right? Because if Nigel disagrees with me, if Nigel has resistance, and I don't know about that, he just walks out of my meeting or my office in this hypothetical scenario, then it could mean that nothing will change going forward. Because Nigel will walk away and think, that Kyle guy, he's a bit of a jerk, isn't he? And he'll continue on his way and doing what he wants to do. So it's very important that you check with the person how they feel about what you've said. And you can simply do that by asking, what do you think about that, Nigel? How does that sound to you? And then Nigel can tell me whether he disagrees, whether he has a different point of view, or whether he does agree. Now, if he disagrees, well, we can talk it out, right? I can hear his side of the story. Maybe Nigel has a valid point and I'm wrong. Maybe, maybe not. But we can find a solution by talking it through. And then on the other side, if he agrees, great. Now we've made an agreement. We've done a virtual shake of hands, Nigel. We can try and keep you accountable. We can both be accountable to each other in that next meeting, right? So that you are speaking last, for instance. So those are the 3 steps. And thank you so much, Nigel, for coming up here. I think it was just good for some people to have a visual when I was describing that. You're definitely not a bulldozer. You're the friendliest man I know. But yeah, thank you so much for that.
Well, just before you leave that, Carl, I did want to say closure. The bit you had on the end there, the third point, is so important, because very often I've been in meetings where just the first 2 bits have been done or variations of them, and you leave not really knowing where you are. So I think that's a really great tip. So thanks for sharing.
No problem at all. Just to recap for everyone, step 1 is the problem, right? Talk about the problem, explain the why behind it. Step number 2 is the answer. What is the solution going forward? And give a clear example of the answer. And then step number 3, check. Have an open-ended question to see how the person feels about it. What we're going to do now is actually give you another opportunity to practice delivering feedback, but this time to practice delivering suggestions. Now, I think I've overused Nigel for this meeting so far, but I do want to do another table topic so that we've got a reference point to evaluate and give feedback from. So if you would like to do a table topic today, if you would like to do that, please try and share your video and your audio, and I'll bring you up to the main stage and tell you what the table topic is. This is a great opportunity for you to get some feedback on your speaking. And ultimately, feedback is how we improve going forward. So if you want to take the opportunity, share your audio and visual now, please. And I'll bring you onto the main stage. And if not, we're bringing Merv up. That's the backup plan here. So if anyone wants to go, say now. Randy, brilliant, superb stuff. Let me bring you up, my friend.
Thank you, Carl. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you sound fantastic. You sound
Great
fantastic.
stuff.
How are you doing today?
Not bad at all, not bad at all.
Great. Well, Randy, I'm going to ask you a question. You've seen how it's done. Nigel gave us a great demonstration. For everyone else, as Randy's speaking, please write down ways in which you think Randy could improve. Randy, I'm sure you're going to be flawless. I'm sure you're going to knock it out of the park. But if we can find even a little, if we can even find a little something today, that will be fantastic. It's just to give people an opportunity to practice, my friend. Right? Are you ready for your question?
Ready as can ever be.
Excellent, excellent. I'm going to read this twice, so you'll have some time to think. Okay? What's a cause or purpose you deeply believe in? What's a cause or purpose you deeply believe in?
What's a cause or purpose I deeply believe in? That's a deep question now. Yeah. Because that's going into the heart of me. What do I really believe in? I think it's hard work. Hard work is one thing that I truly believe in. Because with hard work, you can achieve so much. So much. Take all the great people in today's society. They always achieve with hard work. if I take my own life, for example, I am where I am today because of hard work. I grew up on a farm with not a lot, but I was able to, with the hard work of my parents and my own hard work, push myself from humble beginnings to where I am today. So you ask me, Carl, what's the one thing I truly believe in? I say, it's hard work. Thank you, Carl.
Thank you so much, Randy. That was brilliant, my friend. It really was. Now, if you would like to give Randy some feedback, please try and share your audio and your screen now, or your camera rather, and we'll bring you up to the main stage. Just while people are preparing Randy and getting their head around that epic performance there, let me tell you some of the things I loved about that. One of the things I loved the most was your composure, my friend. I mean, my God, you truly own that virtual space. And I think that's so beneficial because it makes people feel at ease when they listen to you. They know Randy's got this sorted, right? They're not worrying about whether something will go wrong because they're in Randy's safe hands. And the other thing I loved as well, there was that personal example of you starting from the farm. What farm was it, by the way? What part? Where are you from exactly?
It was a poultry farm, and I grew up in a poultry farm. And we used to wake up very early in the morning, working in the farm. It's 5:30 a.m. in the morning. And that was my whole life from Monday to Sunday.
In a completely different place. That's incredible.
I am. Yeah.
But that personal example, it really gives your point more credibility, which I absolutely loved. So let's give Randy a little bit more feedback in terms of suggestions here. If you have suggestions, please try and share your screen and audio now. Randy wants them. Come on. Someone's got to have some feedback for Randy here.
Oh, yeah.
What we got? Come up onto the main stage if you want to share your recommendations. We're going to give them about 7 more seconds, Randy. Oh, Merv's here. Merv, take us away.
Well, I've heard Randy before, and he has convinced me of the value of hard work. So I thought it's a great example that he gave us there. But I really like the sincerity, and I like the fact he bought himself a little bit of time, and then he said, what do I really believe in? So we knew that what he was going to say, or what you were going to say, Randy, was from the heart. So I think that was important. And your eye contact is amazing. It was speaking to me in the wow. So I don't know how you got your setup there. I know what your background looks like, which is amazing. But you do speak directly to the audience.
Absolutely. And Merv, do you have any, agree with all of those points, do you have any suggestions for how Randy could improve?
I find that difficult. No, none off the top of my head.
Fair enough. That's absolutely fine. So we've got Derek. We've got Derek in the waiting room. So I'm going to bring him up and let's see if he has any suggestions in terms of how Randy could improve. Derek, are you there, my friend?
Yeah. Hi, Kyle. Randy, great speech. Excuse me. Very well improvised. And I'm going to try and go with what Kyle has asked me to focus on, which is to give you the feedback in terms of what you could, opportunities to improve. I noticed that you're using good body language, good gesticulation. However, it is questionable as to whether or not you're repeating it a bit unnecessarily. It's always good to use body language with deliberate intention rather than just in a repetitive cycle. So I think that if you were able to find ways to work on that, I think you would take it from good to great. Back to you, Kyle.
Thank you, Derek. Thank you. That's good.
Yeah, thank you, Derek. That was a great suggestion there. And I loved how Derek picked out a specific thing. He highlighted the problem really well, a bit of repetitiveness. The only way I think Derek could have strengthened that recommendation is if he had given an example of perhaps when Randy had used a bit too much and where he could have had perhaps nothing. So that was the only thing there, but great, especially off the cuff, Derek. Loved that. Thank you so much. Ola, can I come to you, my friend?
Yes, thank you. For my feedback, Randy's speech was very well delivered. It was clear. We heard what he was saying. It was impactful as well. A slight suggestion that I have for Randy is around his vocal variety. When Randy said hard work, he should have emphasized how it was hard, arduous, hard work. That would have given more gravitas and really honed in the essence of the hardness of the work that you were doing. And especially when you use farm, maybe pause after the farm so that that word just doesn't whiz past us. We actually can imagine a farm and associate the hard work to the farm. Answer the solution. Yeah, I've given examples. And you know what, Randy, what do you think about that?
I think that's an excellent suggestion. And I just thinking about it now, I can see places where I could have paused and really go into that gravitas of the farm and say, I grew up in the farm. I could have done that. Yeah. So thanks for that. Really
Excellent, Ola. That was absolutely brilliant. Perfect. I mean, you highlighted the problem brilliantly there, right? Not enough emphasis. You gave the answer, show it in your voice so that we've got that, and you explained why, because we can sense the embrace and the hardship a little bit more that way. And then you even checked in as well. So yeah, full marks, my friend. Great stuff there. Thank you so much, both gents. Really appreciate that. And hopefully that gives everyone an insight in terms of how you can use that structure. Yes, I know we're talking about public speaking here, but it applies in the workplace when you're giving someone feedback as well. In fact, this structure works even better in one-to-one conversations behind closed doors. It can work in group environments too, but that structure of first the problem, the answer, and then checking in works tremendously well for giving your suggestions. And if you pair that, of course, with sounding empathetic at key times and also sounding confident, you're going to be gold. You're going to be gold. Right. So moving forward then, we went through phase 1 and phase 2 of delivering feedback. Just to recap what they are, phase 1 was celebrate, okay? We're going to celebrate the speaker or the person rather, and tell them what they've done well, what their key strengths are. Then we're giving suggestions. And one little bonus point here, always make sure that you're celebrating more things than suggesting. Okay, that's just better. If you've got more suggestions than celebrations, tends to leave people on a bit more of a negative. So always try to balance them correctly. But phase number 3 is what we're going on to now, and that is to inspire. It's to leave the person feeling inspired after you've delivered their feedback. In other words, leave them feeling like they want to take action on your words. And before we dive into this in more depth, I'd actually like you to have another discussion in a breakout room. I want you to share, when it comes to the end of the feedback conversation, how do you leave someone in a positive place? I'll say that again. When it comes to the end of a feedback conversation, how do you leave someone in a positive place? I'm going to put you in a breakout room with 3 others again. I'll make it new rooms in case you didn't like the last people you were with. And then we'll come back in and bring some people up to the main stage to share what their group discussed. So maybe while you're in your group, nominate a spokesperson for when we come back into the main room. I'll create these rooms for us now. Give me approximately 7 seconds and we'll get them underway. Remember, you've only got 8 minutes, so go around the whole room, alphabetical order, and I will see you very soon. Rooms are opening now. Welcome back from your breakout room. Hope it was another good discussion. So, how do you leave someone on a positive at the end of the feedback conversation? If you'd like to share what your group discussed, you know what to do. Try and share your video and audio, and I'll bring you up onto the main stage. And if you're not comfortable doing that, type it into the chat. But it's always good to see someone and hear it from a voice instead of letters on a type chat. All right, Adil is straight in here. Here we go.
Right. Okay. So we've discussed a couple of things, but I think the things that stand out for me is if you are sharing feedback with the person and giving tips to improve, what you can probably do is put yourself on the spot and share with the person that how you have done or how you have yourself improved in those situations. Obviously, if it's applicable, and give some examples. So by putting yourself actually in front of that person, I think it would be more digestible, the feedback by that person. So
right.
That's one of the things. And if you want to end your kind of conversation on a positive note, maybe use a quote from a favorite personality, popular personality, or share an experience with that person, because you want to leave on a positive and a keynote, because that's more likely that he or she will remember that last thing that you will have said.
Yeah. So let's break down those points there. The first tip is all about sharing your personal journey, right? If you let's say the Nigel situation, right? If I used to be a bulldozer, but I took a step back in meetings, I could show how I've progressed, and that might inspire Nigel to do the same. So yeah, I like that idea. And then also we've got the quote. And yeah, if you could pull a quote out the bag which lines up with what you're discussing, why not? Quotes can always go down well. Thank you very much, Adil, for that. Would anyone else like to come up and share what they discussed in their breakout room? Any more suggestions for how to leave the conversation on a positive note? Come up and share if you would like to, or type it into the chat. If not, there must be someone else out there. Here we go. I think we've got Ona coming up. Hi, Ona.
Hi, yeah. Okay, with our group, I thought Mev was actually going to be. We kind of want that to say, in terms of inspire, how do you go about that? You retrace back to what you suggested. Surely you should have come up with some actions, but then you carry them forward. And how do you have to show some interest in that development? That's one of the things that we kind of outlined.
Yeah.
And how, I guess, depends on how the feedback is handled as well. Is that person willing to go and improve on that? You can leave the door open to say, get back to me whenever you feel like, because sometimes you give feedback, I probably need to sleep on that feedback. Does it still make sense the next morning? And then if it doesn't, if I want more clarity, I can get back to you, say, that still doesn't make sense. Do I have that room to be able to do that? And then I can avail myself to be able to say, yeah, this is what we discussed. Are we still in agreement? And then we can take it from there. And then I guess the last one, take them for a cup of coffee or two. Everything.
Yeah, win them over with food, right? I hear a cake works for everyone, right?
Yes, exactly.
No, love those points. I really like that idea of retracing your steps. We're going to talk about that in a second. And also showing your involvement, right? Your interest in their development. I think that's some superb points there. Thank you so much. Once again, really appreciate that, Una. So let's talk about this more in depth, because what we have to think about is the emotional roller coaster the person we're giving feedback to is going on. If you recount, to begin with, we're celebrating them, right? So they're almost going up. They're feeling good. They're feeling positive. They think they're great, which is fantastic. But even though our suggestions, phase 2, are positive, their mood, their demeanor is still probably going to drop a little bit, because no one likes hearing, what they're not doing well, right? So it might just drop a touch. It's not going to go right down, but it'll drop a touch. And now we need to figure out how to bring them back up so that they're feeling inspired to take action on our words. Let me give you my insight on how to do that, and what I've been doing when giving feedback to speakers, which is what I have to do on a daily basis, and in other walks of life as well. So let me share my screen with you. I believe the first thing that you have to do to inspire someone at the end of the conversation is you have to remind. You have to remind them about what they did well. Remind them of the positives. Because if you think about it, you've just talked about how they can improve. You've just talked about suggestions, but remind them of what you celebrated earlier in the conversation. So remind them that they're a great problem solver, that they're always timely, that they are fantastic in meetings. Remind them that their hair always looks phenomenal, right? Build them up a little bit more. At the end, remind them of the positives. Remind them of what they did well, because that's going to get them going in an upward trajectory in terms of their mood. And then that's when this next point comes in very nicely. The second thing you have to do after you've reminded them of what they've done well is to predict. Predict where they can go if they take action on your suggestions. What does the future look like for them if they take action on your suggestions? Now, the future and how you predict can be many different things. If we go back to the scenario with Nigel and I, where Nigel was a bulldozer and I'm giving him a suggestion of speaking last in meetings, potentially I could say to Nigel, if appropriate and if righteous, I could say, you know, Nigel, if you can take on board that point about speaking last and letting others speak, you could potentially be in a management position in the next few months. I could say something like that. If it is, fair, and if it is true, if the potential is there, I could say that someone could elevate in their career. That could be the prediction I make if they follow the suggestions I'm giving them. Or maybe that's not appropriate. Maybe I'm dealing with someone who's incredibly nervous before presentations, and I give them some suggestions on how to calm their nerves. I could predict by saying, if you follow these tips, you're going to feel so much more confident in your next presentation. And that's an emotional progression for that individual. But always try and predict what will happen if someone follows your suggestions. This will inspire them to take action on your words. Nigel will feel more inspired to speak last in meetings because he might get up the ladder at work. Or perhaps this other person might be inspired to use my tips on feeling less nervous because they'll feel more confident, which is the feeling they want going forward. Predict what someone's future will look like. This is a very powerful thing you can do when giving feedback. And then the last tip I will give you is this one, which is about to pop up on your screen. After you've made that prediction, next is to ask. Ask 2 questions to be specific. The first question you should ask is there anything I can do to help? Is there anything I can do to support you further? Because there might be something holding the individual back from taking action. And by you asking that question, you highlight that problem and you can find a way around it perhaps. Or maybe there's something that you can just do to give someone a little extra support, which will help them take action. So ask if there's anything that you can do to help. You are in this with the individual. You are giving them a suggestion, so at least give them the opportunity to seek help from you if they need it. And then the second question you should ask is, do you have any questions? Any questions on that? Is that clear? Because if it's not clear, we have already spoke about it before, it ends up being bad feedback. So you need to figure out if there are any concerns, if there are any questions, if there are any points that need clarified. You want them clarified in the conversation before someone leaves. Because if you can do that, if you can leave someone feeling clear about what they need to do going forward, far more likely to take action on your words. So just to recap that last section there, when it comes to inspiring people, this is at the end of the conversation. 3 things I suggest. Number 1, remind them of the positives. Remind them of what you celebrated before. Second, predict. predict what their future will look like if they take action on your suggestions, on your recommendations. And then thirdly, ask. Ask if there's anything you can do to support them with these suggestions, and also ask if they have any questions or any concerns. And if you think about it, that rounds up our session for today. To start with, you celebrate the person. You celebrate what they've done well. That's phase one. Phase two, you suggest. And we've talked about suggesting with those 3 steps of problem, answer, and then check. And then phase 3, we've just covered that there. Before I round up the session for today, I hope that's given you a clear idea of how you can deliver feedback in the workplace, at home, and maybe even at your speakers club if you are into Toastmasters and other things like that. I want to pause now and see if we have any questions. We can perhaps do a Q&A for the next 5-10 minutes, depending on how many questions there are. So Nigel, I don't know if you've seen any questions pop up in the chat that I've missed as I've been speaking.
I haven't seen any yet, Kyle. I just wanted to rewind you a little bit when you were talking, I think in the first part, about the inflection at the end of the sentence, either being down for being a bit more authoritative rather, and a bit more convincing, and sort of tailing up and being a bit more sort of, you know, not weaker, but sort of lighter with it all. And the sort of thing that comes to my mind is when you're sitting on an aircraft and you're listening to the captain speaking, he's sort of talking in a very slow, deliberate tone, because what he is telling you is very important with regard to, you know, the flight and everything else, and everything else that's going to happen. And then, of course, you get the stewardesses and the cabin crew that just want to sell you loads of drinks and everything else. And they're always very flighty and very light. At the end of their sentences, they always tend to go up like that, you know, and say, we'll be around in just a moment and things like that. So I think that's a really good practical thing. And certainly I've learned about being more grounded, I guess, and more purposeful. And I would even say deliberate in the way that you craft what you say to get your message across in the right way. And that hopefully does make sense. But that's been one of my big takeaways. So thank you for that. I'm just going to read some of what's come through in chats. Tosin has mentioned that she loved the idea. I'm not sure. I don't know if it was Adil or someone that mentioned using a nice quote, because sometimes somebody else has said it far better than we ever can. And that's a really nice way of encapsulating that. And Tosin goes on to say that predicting will also help create an environment of safety and improvement as well. So I think as well in what you're doing in all this, Kyle, you are creating that environment of psychological safety, aren't you? Where, you know, it's like we started at this session, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. It's that you know that, you know, it's going to be held within that arena. So that's absolutely fine.
And that's so critical with depending on what you're talking about. I think there was a question previously about should you deliver this feedback as to a group or an individual. I think if it's in the workplace, it's always good to do the feedback individually if you can. I know it's more time consuming, but people in general are far more willing to speak up and say what's bothering them or what's concerning them when it's one-to-one. I mean, we all know public speaking is one of the biggest fears in the world. So when you put people in a group environment and you begin to suggest how they can improve, they're probably not going to, you know, say what concerns they might have about that. So much better to do it one-to-one if you can, is what I would say.
Yeah. One tip I was given many years ago was, if you're in a group situation having to do something similar to what you're talking about this evening, always praise and celebrate subordinates, but never praise your boss. Always do that in private, because it can sometimes seem a little sycophantic if you're not too careful. So always get that sort of separation and boundary. And I'm just looking, we do actually have a question from Bolslaw here. I don't know if you want to bring yourself forward onto the main stage there, Bolslaw, and ask the question directly of Kyle. Do you want to do that? He does. He's all yours. I'll jump back on in a minute, Kyle.
Yeah, sure. I'll just bring him up.
Great.
Hi, Kyle. Hi, Nigel.
Hi.
Thanks. Yeah, so I asked a question because I personally sit in this kind of SMT, so senior management team or management team, in between kind of boss and everyone else. And sometimes I know that there is some kind of feedback needed based on the observations or results achieved. And the question is quite simple: how do you make an impact with a feedback to the leadership or your boss or whoever is above you, if you are certain that some of the improvements are either needed or necessary to to improve things or to make things better?
Yeah, well, I mean, everything we've discussed, if you can bring that all together, that's certainly going to help you make an impact. But when it comes to giving feedback upwards to your boss, I think when giving the suggestions, it's also very important to point out how they will benefit from that, like personally, how that will improve their life. Yes, it'll improve the team's life and perhaps everyone below them, but also how it will improve their life at the same time. So if you can show that benefit to them with your feedback, I think it'll have an impact on them, and they'll encourage them to take action. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. I think it spins around the wise house and kind of implementation of what was agreed, right? But sometimes we all know that some people are more thick than others, saying on the skin, thick on the skin, and
Sure.
some people tend to dismiss or uptake the feedback or some suggestions better than the others or worse than others. So I think from my personal experience, the circle of what you've explained today in terms of showing the problem, showing the solution, kind of enforcement of that may not necessarily work on all people.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a general rule for feedback, though. I mean, the real issue here is that the individual is not willing to take on board any feedback, is what it sounds like, right? They're blocked off to begin with. And as someone giving feedback, as an evaluator, whatever you want to call yourself, you can only go so far. You can point out things. You can even say, look, we've all discussed this and we all agree on it. I've even got a list of people who have signed here saying this is true. But if the individual is not willing to change, what can you do, right? That the change has got to come from within. You can do everything you can to explain it to them, to make it clear. But if they're not interested in improving things, very hard to work with that individual. So all I can say is give it the very best you've got, my friend. Show them how they will personally benefit, because people ultimately care most about themselves, I think. And that's probably your best path to improving going forward. Does that make sense? Does that answer the question?
Yeah, it does. It does. Thank you very much. I think Adil has another question as well.
Super. Adil, do you want to come up to the main stage and ask it? Right, here we go. Hi, Adil.
Hello again.
Good to see you again. Good to see you.
Thanks. I was just wondering actually that I've come across other feedback models, especially when you are requesting feedback on yourself. Like as a manager, you want to have your team's feedback so that you can reflect on and improve yourself. So other models that I've come across, like SBI, situation, behavior, and impact, a little bit of similar what you've kind of taken us through. And there is a 4D model as well, like discuss, and why do you want to have feedback, why it is important to have the feedback actually on yourself. So can we mix them up, or can we stick to one model? What was your recommendation?
Well, you have to decide what works for you and what you get the best results from. So I get the best results from what I've described to you in my line of work of giving feedback to speakers and receiving feedback as well. But my line of work is very different from other people's, right? And you have to see what works for you. I think when it comes to you receiving feedback as a manager, that's a very different situation. That's all about the questions you ask of people. because you could ask a poor question and you're going to get poor results, or you could ask a very insightful question and you're going to get great results for feedback in terms of how you improve. It's all about wording and selection of questions in that case. And some of those models you described might be better for feedback that way around than the one I've talked about today.
Right. Okay, good. All right, thanks.
No problem at all. No problem at all. Any other questions at all? Maybe one more if there is, and then I'll round things up for today. I'll wait about 10 seconds, and if there's not any, then I'll move on. All right, I think we're all out of questions. Remember I told you at the start that guy, Jim, helped me tremendously in terms of my path going forward. Because at the time, to be honest with you, I was a psychology student. And if you know any psychology students, you'll know that they choose psychology because they don't know what they want to do with their life. And that was my situation. And that man literally gave me direction that day. Once I started trying to improve my speaking and started to make progress, that's when things took off for me. And you can do the same for your colleagues, for your friends, and for your family. Your words truly do have power. Your words truly can elevate people. But if you do want to elevate them, make sure you follow those 3 phases. Phase 1, celebrate the person. Talk about their strengths. Talk about what they've done well. Phase 2, make your suggestions. And make sure when you're saying your suggestions, you're using the correct tones and you're using the structure we discussed. And then, of course, phase 3, inspire them. Remind them of what they've done well, right? Predict where they can go going forward if they follow your advice. And lastly, ask them if there's anything you can do to help. And if you can do that, you will elevate people to new heights. Thank you so much for listening today, for partaking today. I really hope you've enjoyed the session. Connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm always putting public speaking tips up on there. You might find them beneficial, but it'd be great to stay in touch if you are on LinkedIn. Have a great night, everyone. And I look forward to hearing how you elevate people the next time you're delivering feedback. I'll hand over to you, Nigel.
Thanks so much, Carl. Really great session. I did promise everybody entertainment, energy and excitement, and I have to say you didn't disappoint. So thank you so much for that. Always welcome back here at the chapter to give these really inspiring presentations and workshops. And remember, everyone, it's all about celebration. It's about suggestion and inspiration. And I think, Kyle, you've given us bucket loads of that this evening. So thank you once more. I know that Merv has diligently dropped into the chat somewhere across all the comments that are now flooding into that channel. There is a link to a feedback survey, which will give you the PDU code. Do you want to take it from here, Merv?
Yes, I can. So the link is there. It's actually pinned to the top within chat. So hopefully you'll be able to find it there. Maybe I should post it in again. One of the advantages of providing feedback via our system is you get to the last page of feedback and you get the PDU code. So for many of you that are PMP and need that code, it's there for you. But we incentivize the completion of the form through that. Again, many thanks for joining us. This has been events that have been put on for our volunteers. We really do value our volunteers, hence we put on some great events. We want to hear from you what you want in our autumn term as we shape things for that. So hopefully if you've got some good ideas, provide us with feedback on that. We have just one more webinar Thursday evening this week. It will be a great webinar before we break for our summer holidays. Please do join us to hear from Regis Shaw on Thursday evening. But apart from that, also from me, massive thanks to you, Carl, for coming along and imparting so many pearls of wisdom and actionable insights. So really good, and thank you for that. And a special thank you to Randy for standing in when I was about to be dragged in, kicking and screaming by Carl. So thank you for that too. Okay, good night, everyone.